circumcision is particularly important because that's what Galatians is all about, as in the conflict in Galatians. So yeah, well, we're starting in Galatians, but we never start in Galatians because why would we do that? Circumcision. The other thing about Old Testament law is that when you come from most Christian backgrounds, most Christian thinkings are kind of standoffish when it comes to the law anyway. And mostly what you hear is that, okay, you got 10 main rules and you got about a whole bunch of other ones, and if you break any of them, then they stone you to death. And that's pretty much all you come away knowing about the Torah. And so when you talk about circumcision, oh yeah, that's just one of those laws. And so if they circumcise, so if anybody who's not circumcised dies, I guess that's the way you end up thinking about it. But we're going to find tonight that that's very, very much not the case. We also talked before about how the Old Testament's the Jewish Bible and New Testament's the Christian Bible, right? That's how we're taught to think about those things. If you were here before, if you watched my video, then you know that's not the case. So circumcision, we're understanding that's an Old Testament thing, right? And in the New Testament, circumcision is not really there, is how we kind of think about it. But you know what? The word circumcision is found more in the New Testament than it is in the Old Testament. You find it's actually, you have the Bible search program, it's 76 times in the New Testament and 70 times in the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, it's not even talked about circumcision. Because the 4 times, only once is the command to circumcise given to the nation of Israel. Only once, as a perpetual statute. Circumcision of the heart is found 4 times in the Torah. Okay, that's in the law. Circumcision of the heart is something in the Old Testament law. We think, that's a new covenant thing. Well, that was given in the Old Testament. So it's found actually 70 times in the Old Testament. And we have what's known as the covenant of circumcision. That's where we're going to start in Genesis chapter 17, verse 10. This is where God says to Abraham, "This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in your flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations. He who is born in your house and bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant, he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from among his people. He has broken my covenant." So this was given to Abraham. So the sign, that's very interesting also because, see, one of the mix-ups is that we talk about this, is that one of the confusing things is that the idea that circumcision is the covenant. No, circumcision is a sign of the covenant. And I don't know if you're here when we talked about that. I have a ring on my finger. This is not my marriage. This is a sign of my marriage. It is not the substance of my covenant with my wife. It's a sign of. And Paul goes into this in graphic detail, actually, in Romans chapter 4. I'm just going to read it. And for 9 and 10, he says, "Is this blessedness of the circumcision only, or on the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. How then was it reckoned, being in circumcision or uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision." What he's referring to is Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. Okay, Genesis chapter 17:10 is where the sign of circumcision is given. But in Genesis 15:6 is where God says, Abraham believed on God, and to him and for that it was accounted for righteousness. And so this confirms, it's a Jewish doctrine, Old Testament Jewish doctrine, salvation is by grace through faith. Everybody happy? Okay, so who has to be circumcised? Genesis chapter 17, it's all the males in Abraham's household and all his servants and everybody that's part of his traveling circus. Okay, all the people there that's part of his clan. Okay, in Exodus chapter 12, before protecting the Passover, but then in Joshua chapter 5, before crossing the Delaware, Jordan, before crossing the Jordan. They all had to stop, and they all had to be circumcised. Oops. Wow. I just hit somebody in the head. But those are the 3 times. So as a nation of Israel, though, as a nation that's continuing, who has to be circumcised? Look in Leviticus chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a woman is conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her customary impurity, and she shall be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. So, every male child born that is 8 days old. So, let's go back to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus 12, verses 43 through 48. This is when they're given instructions on preparing the Passover, the very first Passover, while they're in Egypt. And he gives further instructions for the continuing of how this is supposed to go. So, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it. But every man's servant who is bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then he may eat it. A sojourner and a hired servant shall not eat it. In one house it is to be eaten. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break any of its bones. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. Here's a very important. Verse 48 is, And when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as a native in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat it. So, let's do some scenarios. Okay. You're from Lithuania, and you're visiting Egypt, and you go, oh, wow, this whole Passover thing, this is really cool. I want to do that. You're not circumcised. So you need to be circumcised in order to partake of the Passover. Okay? It's a country in Africa. So you're from Jordan. You come to Israel. You don't want to keep the Passover. You're setting up shop and you're selling camel skins in Jerusalem. Okay? You live there. Do you have to be circumcised? No. So you can be non-Israeli, you can be a stranger living in Israel and not be circumcised. Now, here's where it gets funny. Joseph, say you're Jewish and you grew up in Syria, okay? And you come back to Israel and you're not circumcised. Do you have to be circumcised? No. No. Unless you partake of the Passover. Unless you partake of the Passover lamb. No, I'm talking about the Torah. What the Torah says here. One law. Here's the killer. One law shall be for you, as for the stranger that dwells within your gate. So the stranger comes in and lives in the community uncircumcised. He does not have to become circumcised to be part of the community. He's an equal standing. Same way, if someone who is native Jewish is not circumcised, comes into the community, he does not have to become circumcised to still be part of the community. Because it's the same law. You're to treat them the same. That's what verse 49 says.